I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me here today to talk about Fight for Sight. And I probably guess not many people in the audience have heard of Fight for Sight. But we are the leading charity funding pioneering research to treat sight loss and prevent eye disease in the UK. And we spend about £3 to £4 million annually on new research projects. And these are selected following open competition and external peer review. Fight for Sight is a member of the Association of Medical Research Charities, and this is an umbrella organisation that provides us with best guidance and best practice for the grant awarding process. So it sort of means that we just don't fund our friends. We have a rigorous process to go through. The charity is actually 50 years old this year. We have had lots of really exciting achievements, but we realise that we have a lot more work to do because there are about 2 million people in the UK with sight loss, and we know this is going to double by 2050. Currently, our research portfolio, it's funding about 150 research projects at 35 universities and hospitals throughout the UK, and we have a current commitment of 8.4 million. This money we have to raise by fundraising. Despite what Daniel said, I'm not fundraising, I'm research. But I work very closely with our fundraising team, but my area is the whole research of the charity. The charity has 6 clear priorities for research, and we use these priorities. They've been developed as part of our research strategy. And I just briefly go through them. It's developing and testing new and more effective treatments, improving the understanding of the cause of eye disease, developing ways of preventing the most common causes of sight loss, improving the early detection of eye diseases, improving through eye research the quality of life for adults and children living with sight loss, and also identifying and assessing emerging threats to sight. And I'm sure if you were to ask yourself, what would I like research to do? I'm sure it should be lots of those things. It's developing new treatments, it's early diagnosis, it's improving our understanding of Blepharospasm. At the charity, we had an exercise to set priorities for eye research. The eye research sector doesn't necessarily have priorities. There are many reasons why you would want to set priorities for eye research. There are limited funding resources, and you may be surprised to hear of how little funding goes into eye research. If you look at the top 18 charities with an income of over 3 million, their spend is about 586 million. Of this, only about 4.9 million is spent on research. That's actually about less than 1%. That is actually very, very small. We also need to inform our research strategy. Our research strategy is developed from understanding the needs of patients, understanding what are the new areas we should be looking at, emerging threats to sight. And I suppose finally, it's to ensure that research is targeted for the needs of patients. And that's why you're here today, telling us how important research is for you. We did an exercise called the Sight Loss and Vision Priority Setting Partnership, and I know it sounds a mouthful. It was a very, very large exercise. It's a consultation with patients, carers, relatives, and eye healthcare professionals across the UK to set priorities for eye research. We had involvement we worked closely with many key stakeholders in the eye sector, the NIHR Biomedical Research Centre, the College of Optometrists, the Royal College of Ophthalmologists, the Royal National Institute for Blind People, and the UK Vision Strategy. The whole exercise was overseen by an independent non-profit making organisation called the James Lind Alliance. And they have a very robust methodology for prioritisation of unanswered questions from both the patients and the healthcare perspective. They have to date done about 30 different PSPs in various disease areas like asthma, urinary incontinence, diabetes, Alzheimer's. So we were very lucky to work with them, and we're very happy to work with them because of this robust process. So as I said, they bring relatives, carers and clinicians together to identify unanswered research questions. It's an agreement by consensus of a top 10 prioritized list of uncertainties for research. Another criteria and objective of the whole exercise was to publicize the methods and the results of the priority setting partnership and draw the results to the attention of research funders. I don't have time to go through the whole process because in time it took nearly 18 months and it was a large chunk of my life, but there are many people in the audience who contributed to this process, and obviously without them it wouldn't have happened. Fight for Sight actually took the lead and I was responsible for the project management. But we set up a stakeholder group, a steering group, and then this was followed by a stakeholder meeting. This stakeholder meeting was vital to engage with as many charities in the eye sector as possible. And at our stakeholder meeting, we engaged with about 40 different eye charities in the sight loss sector. A lot of these are disease-specific eye charities like the Glaucoma Association, the Macular Society, RP Fighting Blindness. And we got buy-in from their organisations that they thought this was a very good idea to look at priorities for eye research. The next part of it, which was the most important part of it, was a survey. It was done by survey methodology. It was mainly done by SurveyMonkey, an online survey, but also we distributed hard copies to people who would like them. Also, we made it available in Braille and on a CD because we wanted to get out to as many people as possible with sight loss. The survey asked just one simple question: what research into prevention and treatment and diagnosis of sight loss would you like to see answered by research? The next part of the exercise was to set up a data assessment group to go through all the data and to eliminate any questions that we already knew the answer to. So there were research questions there that patients asked us that we actually know that research has been done and we know the answers. Then we had to go through a lengthy process of prioritization. The interim prioritization was mainly to get a long list of questions down to a more manageable list that we could take to a final prioritization workshop. These final prioritization workshops were attended by both the patients and the healthcare professionals. As I said earlier, this is a consensus decision-making. Both the clinicians and the patients have to agree the same priorities. And the final part was the dissemination. This is just to give you an idea of the scope of the project. We received 2,200 responses, and that generated over 4,461 questions into 100 different eye conditions. So it was an enormous exercise. At that time, it was one of the largest ones ever done by the James Lind Alliance. Unfortunately, I'll say now that there were not any questions on Blepharospasm. They were made, I'll show you later on what the questions were. But the interesting thing about this pie chart is that we had a huge engagement from people with sight loss. We had over 64% of the responses coming from people with sight loss. Also, partners, relatives and carers contributed, parents, different organisations, and of course we needed the input from the eye healthcare professionals. What we did with all those questions after we'd eliminated the questions that we already knew the answers to, we categorised them into 12 different eye disease categories. So we had cataract, ocular inflammatory disease, ocular cancer, glaucoma, corneal and external eye disease, refractive error, ocular motility, age-related macular degeneration, inherited retinal diseases, childhood onset eye diseases, vitreoretinal ocular trauma, neuro-ophthalmology, and retinal vascular diseases. So it was a huge range of diseases. And as I said, this was a large exercise to try and allocate all the questions to a particular eye disease category. To cut a long story short, we had the final priority. We took them to the different stages. We had the interim prioritization and the final prioritization. And we launched the report at a House of Lords reception. And this really was to get our report in front of ministers or people in government, because it's really important for the government to know what the priorities are for people with sight loss. And we know age-related macular degeneration is the leading cause of sight loss in the country in people over 65. We also know glaucoma causes irreversible sight loss. So there are many conditions that we really need to concentrate on, well, not least blepharospasm also. So we widely disseminated all our reporting to the funding organisations. So other funding organisations can use these priorities in their strategy. And they were published in the British Medical Journal so that the eye healthcare professionals could see the output of the exercise. I have a stand here today, and there's some copies of the Sight Loss and Vision Priority Setting Partnership for anyone that's interested. Also, you can download it from the Fight for Sight website. So what do we do next with these priorities? Well, as I said, we promoted them to research funders to encourage the integration of these research priorities into their organisational plans and also into research strategies. Fight for Sight asks applicants to state which priorities their application addresses. So we actually gathering information from every grant that we fund about which of those priorities their research addresses. And we're also developing a resource that demonstrates to the public and to research funders the priorities that have attracted funding and the sources of funding. Also, the National Institute of Health Research, which is the NHS, but it's the research arm of the NHS, they have an identification team that look at these key priorities and they translate them into research topics that can be answered by research. So they commission research into some of these topics. This is just a quote from Professor Sir Peng T. Kaur, who's the director of the National Institute for Health Research in London, and he said the priority setting partnership has been incredibly important. It has given the public a loud voice. They are telling us that eye and vision research is very important to them, and they have all expressed their priorities. Researchers need to know these priorities, embrace them, and use them to maximize their case for funding. And I think that's a very, very powerful quote. It's the power of patients. It's empowering patients. We've worked with patients. They've told us what they want. Here's a few quotes from patients we worked with. What a fascinating and worthwhile experience it is to be involved in deciding possible future research projects. As a parent of a child with microphthalmia, I felt that my opinions and concerns were taken into consideration. The next one, thanks you for giving the keratoconus group the opportunity to contribute to the priority setting. It was a really interesting day and very much enjoyed. It was worthwhile, and we listened to a variety of views from patients and eye healthcare professionals before reaching a consensus. So this is one way of developing priorities for research. I know Andy is going to talk in this session about setting priorities for blepharospasm research. But as I said, there are many different ways to do it. This is very powerful to us research funders in the eye sector to be able to lobby and campaign to get more funding for research. My final slide is talking about Fight for Sight charity partnerships. Fight for Sight in recent years have set up partnerships with other smaller charities, and we've worked with the British Uveitis Society, the Thyroid Eye Disease Charitable Trust, Azure Society, and the Childhood Eye Cancer Charitable Trust, as well as some of the larger charities like RP Fighting Blindness, the Macular Society. The reason that we do this partnership is to, in the case of the very small charities that don't actually fund research, is to kickstart research into their particular eye condition. And we do this by partnering with them, and we make an award for clinical research projects, that research either involving patients or samples from patients. And these projects are up to £15,000. And the partner charity contributes 50% of this. So this has been really a successful partnership. It was born from an annual flagship event that we did at the charity called the Carrots Night Walk. We no longer do that event, but we have now another event that will enable you as patients to actually raise funding for a particular eye disease. And this is called Feast Your Eyes. It was launched this year. It's really about dining in the dark. You can do it from cheese and wine to lunch with friends or a dinner party. You can challenge your senses by dining in the dark and to help fund a future everyone can see. So we ran this 2 weeks ago was the week for it, but you can do it at any time throughout the year. You know, this may be a way of us working with, say, the Dystonia Society to help fund research into blepharospasm. It may be a way of patients getting together and raising funds that could be restricted to a pot specifically for blepharospasm research that could come via Fight for Sight. Research awarded by Fight for Sight because we do, as I said, the open competition and rigorous peer review to make sure it's world-class research. When we make an award to a university, it gets a top-up from the government. It's called the Charity Research Support Fund, and it's equivalent to 25% of the actual grant. So that's really important because our research only supports the direct costs of doing research. It'll support the researcher and the materials they use to do research, but it won't support the whole infrastructure of the university. Fight for Sight is currently writing its next 5-year strategy. We have wonderful plans to increase our income and also to spend more on research. And for me, it's absolutely wonderful to become more aware of what blepharospasm is. As I said, I've never seen a grant application, but hopefully in the future, there'll be lots of people applying to do blepharospasm research. Thank you.
Dolores, can I just ask one quick question just to pick up at one point you made there? So you're saying that that Fight for Sight will match £7,500 of funding to create a small grant?
Yes.
And that would be dedicated to blepharospasm research?
Yes. We could run it as part of our small grants program that we run on an annual basis, working with other charities as well.
And that could be working with other charities, or could it be just with patients not in a charity framework?
Yes, it could.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dolores.